Buonasera.
Good evening, everybody, and good evening to those who are attending online. This event is being followed by people in other countries, and this is why we have simultaneous interpreting into English for all our friends that wanted to join us from abroad. If you are abroad and you wish to have captions, you can turn on the captions button to have the translation in your own language. So let me thank Palazzo Ducale, the foundation Palazzo Ducale that is hosting once again tonight. I would like to thank Almo and Patagonia who accepted our invitation, and they will be here tonight answering our questions. But before calling them onto the stage, I would like to say a few things that make these two companies unique. Both companies are owned by foundations or trusts. Fondazione Capellino is the owner of Almo, while Mr. Fabio Zardini will tell us about the Patagonia's case, which is owned by a trust. And both foundations are non-profit, and their goal is the protection and safeguarding of biodiversity and the planet. The planet is the word that Patagonia uses in a very specific and purposeful sense. Both companies create value, and this value is not used to grow some personal wealth, but this value is completely devoted to regeneration of biodiversity and its safeguarding. These companies also have a long-term vision because they feel that they are tools at the service of a purpose and not just goods makers. So these three things will be useful to everybody, I think, in order to get to know these two companies, and then their own leaders will tell us something more about them tonight. Speaking of today's format, we will have 3 moments. We will start by giving 5 minutes to each of the two companies to introduce themselves. We're not going to be too strict, so this is 5 minutes, which can be even something longer. Then I will be asking both of them 8 questions. The questions will be the same for both companies. And our guests will have 2 minutes each to answer all the questions, every question. Then it will be the time for the audience to ask questions, both people attending in person and people attending online. So we invite you warmly to ask any questions. Don't be shy. Because we are ready to answer any question you will be asking. Having said that, I think we can start. Fabio? I leave you the floor. I'll let you introduce yourself and your role in Patagonia. You're free to start. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to tell about the company. I've been working here for 26 years in Italy in the position of the Italy country manager. 5 minutes are not enough, so if I'm going into greater detail, too much detail, just tell me and stop me. For those who don't know, Patagonia is a California-based company. It's an outdoor sports company manufacturing and selling products for climbing, surfing, flywheeling, fishing, and leisure. And these sports are the passions of our founder, which is now in his 80s, Yvon Chouinard. Mr. Chouinard was a French-Canadian, as you can understand, gather from his name. He was born in Maine, then he moved to Burbank, north of Los Angeles, where he got his start into climbing, and he started forging his own gear, his own pitons to climb. It's the 1957. Then in 1966, since he was also a surfer, he moved to Ventura in California, northern of Santa Barbara. And in Ventura, there are waves, there are surf points. It's not the 1966. He launched his business. He didn't start with clothing, but he started with pitons, with climbing pitons. And he was forging himself these pitons. For him, hand craftsmanship was a basic skill that he also passed over to his children. This handcraft business becomes Chouinard Equipment, and his workshop, which was founded by himself in Ventura, is still in the campus of our main headquarters. Yvon is the man with an S on his shirt, on his working shirt. He likes saying that his first shop was that rug that he would just open at the basis of the crag where he was climbing, and where he would start selling things to his climber friends. And he defined himself someone who became a businessman quite randomly, not by choice. The ones you see here are the holes that result from using pitons in granite rock. And Yvon started having concerns about these holes, and this was quite essential, an essential turning point for him. So in 1972, in the catalog of his company, he explains why he's not going to manufacture pitons anymore. And he introduces the concept of clean climbing, a sort of clean climbing. Obviously, you need protections when you're climbing, but you will use different protections which can be fit into the cracks, but don't make new holes into the rock. So this became then a business, a clothing company. At the beginning, he started importing clothes that he found in Europe, for instance, rugby jerseys. And he liked them because they were quite resistant and especially fit for climbers. Plus, he liked the colors at a time when climbers would usually wear very dull colors. So this new activity, the apparel sector, together with the climbing gear, later became the company as we know it today. Patagonia. The logo is the Fitzroy profile with the color of Patagonia. Then later on he went to Patagonia, traveling by van with the 4 friends of him. He opened a new climbing route, the so-called Californian route, and he gets so enthusiastic about Patagonia that he decided to name his own business after this area. What is Patagonia renowned for? It is for safeguarding the environment, or at least to reduce at the maximum its impact on the environment. Our final purpose is that to clean the whole supply chain of our company. And to do this, we set very ambitious goals. We reduce greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, by 90% by 2050, achieving the net zero goal, for those of you who are aware of this. And this started a few decades ago, in the 90s, where a research on the life cycle of the threads of fibers, which were wool, polyester, cotton, nylon, led to some new business choices in Patagonia. In 1993, for instance, he started making fleece by recycled plastic bottles. Even more important was the year 1996, because cotton, conventional cotton, uses up much chemicals. And since 1993, we've only been using organic cotton. The same happens for dry suits, which are usually used in neoprene, but we started to use Uprex, which comes from natural rubber. But how can we protect the environment? Well, we don't only protect the environment, but we try to be sustainable towards the people along our supply chain. And this is the role of the Fair Trade program. 91% of our production is made in factories which are Fair Trade certified. This means that manufacturers and workers get a benefit for every piece of clothing made for Patagonia. Safeguarding the environment for Patagonia meant allocating 10% of the turnover, and then 1% of sales today, to environmental causes. Then 1% for the planet is a new program, and 5,000 companies decided to join, and they all allocate 1% of their turnover for the environment. We are a B-certified corporation. This means that we don't only want to maximize the shareholders' profits, but we want to safeguard all the stakeholders, be them employees, customers, suppliers, the environment. This means being a B corporation. Patagonia also teaches how to mend things, and probably for my generation, being able to mend things was quite normal. Today is not the case. So we mend and fix all the gear for the customers who bring them back to our stores. Plus, we also go around with this sort of caravan, which is a moving shop in a way, and we fix all Patagonia clothes, and we call this Tiny. Patagonia supports the environment also using his own communication strength. So we make documentary movies. For instance, this is about Europe, Vanishing Lines. This is on the glaciers of Austria. And this documentary is about the development of tourist facilities, the local population that fights this development, and Patagonia supported local population in their struggle, supporting this documentary is about the support to Albanian local population around living around an Albanian river. And I'm getting to the end. Leap forward. In 2018, Yvonne, who already showed his focus, his attention to the environment, considering the urgency of the climate change, he decided that the company mission must be strong and essential to let everybody understand that our company wants to save our planet. And moving on, I think that this led to another choice that was already mentioned by Pier Giovanni, which is a historic passage when in September 2022, the Chouinard family and Yvonne himself took a huge choice that was taken also by the Capellino family, and this was to give the ownership of his business to planet Earth. So Earth is now our only shareholder. How did he do this? He founded a trust. We founded a trust, the Patagonia Purpose Trust and the Holdfast Collective, which are two organizations that took the ownership of the business in order to make clear the purpose of the business so that nobody could buy it, and so that all the revenue of the company, when not reinvested, are invested for the environment. Sorry for talking much.
Ben 7 minuti.
Well, 7 minutes, Fabio. You'll have to make up for that in your answer to the questions later on. So, Giorgio, the floor is yours. We'll be tolerant, but not as tolerant. I'll do my best. So, first of all, I would like to introduce you to Almo Nature. Almo Nature is all profits to the planet. This is our payoff. And we decided to capture the essence of this payoff in a short video that I'm going to show you now.
The trees are whispering softly tonight. They know we're working to make it right. Every dollar we earn, it's not for gain. It's for the rivers, the skies, the rain. For the planet we stand, we give it our all. No matter how big, no matter how small, every profit we make, we send it back home to oceans and forests and earth we all know.
Good afternoon again. My name is Giorgio Raffetto. I joined Almo Nature more than 10 years ago, and today I'm the General Secretary of Fondazione Cappellino and a member of the Board of Directors of Almo Nature, in charge of governance, administration, and tax issues. Talking about a model, I think it's important to tell you about the history of our company, of Almo Nature, and the way we got where we are today, step by step. So today, we have a company that is owned by a foundation. So Almo Nature was established in the year 2000 by an insight Pier Giovanni Capellino had, that is the idea of using, that is producing pet food, using for the first time ever 100% HFC ingredients, which means human food chain, that is, ingredients that are fit for human consumption. That was an incredible insight at that time. But over time, this has turned into one of the standards on the market. So that innovation was also then introduced to kibbles, that is dry food, and also in 100% plant-based litters for cats. Another distinguishing feature of our company is the way we communicate. That is, art, for example, is a tool we used. We also cooperated with photographer Olivieri Toscano, who passed away not so long ago. And we want to put across the idea of respect for dogs and cats who are seen by our company as living beings rather than consumers. So through these corporate values, starting in 2013, Pier Giovanni embarked upon a new path, and I was side by side him. He started a deep reflection on what it means to be entrepreneurs, what it means to do business, and what bringing the word nature into business would mean. So we decided to use the word nature even in the name of the company. We were wondering, was this going to be greenwashing or something really meaningful? And that's how in 2018 we took a radical step. Pier Lorenzo Capellino and Pier Giovanni Capellino decided to relinquish 100% of Almo Nature, 100% of property rights, 100% of voting rights to Fondazione Capellino, whose purpose is to safeguard the biosphere and biodiversity. Things could have been done differently, of course. They could have sold the company and then use the money to help projects, to support and sponsor projects for the environment. But we decided to keep the two things together, working and having the planet in mind. So the company is producing wealth, and then profits are irreversibly donated to the planet, to nature, meaning through the foundation, profits are donated to the planet to protect biodiversity. This is how this model was born, was created. We were also supported by a study by the Università Cattolica di Milano, and this is the model of reintegration economy, which means a socio-economic model that is a market-based model, but the final beneficiary is not private interests, but rather a specific purpose. So the foundation itself became the owner of a company, and by its article of associations, based on it, pursuant to its articles of association, it owns 100% of property rights and voting rights, which are fully donated to the foundation. On the other hand, so this is the foundation. Almo Nature is instead a company operating on the market like other competitors and manufacturing products, making products, but because of this approach of reintegration economy, the company is also giving consumers and buyers this idea of purpose. That is, even consumers know that after taxation, after salaries are paid, after wealth is reinvested into the company. All the remaining profits are reinvested, are donated to the foundation, and therefore used to protect biodiversity and to protect the planet. We can thus understand what this bowl means. This is the bowl that we used for our communication campaigns. This bowl is a symbol. It represents Noah's Ark, and it's a symbol of an alliance forged between humankind and nature. In this case, we have pets who are an extension of us humans, together with wild animals that represent biodiversity in its entirety. So this bowl brings together Almo Nature and Foundation, and this is the symbol of reintegration economy.
Bene, allora veniamo.
Okay, then let's come to our first question. Patagonia will answer first, and then Almo Nature will answer. So the same question for both. Let's please project the question on the screen. So both companies have their own brand, together with a payoff, with a statement. So they have their own payoff, which is in a way an expansion of the meaning of the brand itself and the meaning it wants to convey. So I would like to ask you both to reiterate, to restate your brand's payoff and comment on it.
So io
And I guess you refer to Earth is now our only shareholder, Pier Giovanni. I think this perfectly summarizes what I've quickly told you about earlier. I'm sorry that I was in a hurry because I was being timed. This is the quintessence of our mission. I would like to quote something that our founder once said, and it's a question. Towards whom are the companies going to be responsible? Employees, shareholders, and actually companies don't take responsibility to any of these subjects. They are or should be responsible, should take responsibility with the environment, with the planet, because without the planet there is no business, there is no customers, there is no employees either. So quoting this question by Yvon Chouinard and by recalling what I was telling you earlier, I think it's just normal to get to this synthesis, to this summary. Planet Earth is our only shareholder today. And you've only used up 50% of the time. Yes, you told me that I had to make up for the previous shift. So, Giorgio, the word to you. Yes, Almo Nature, our payoff is all profits to the planet. In our view, the topic of profits is front and center because somehow it summarizes the good aspects, the positive and the negative aspects of the whole capitalist model. We, as businessmen, couldn't do much on the supply chains because this is not something that can fall on a single company, especially in today's world, which is strongly interconnected. So we were wondering how could we do something and start a positive, virtuous circle. And we decided, we understood that we could do something about the allocation of profits. So we could keep the company as a production force on the market and creating wealth, but we could change something so that this wealth wouldn't go into the financial system, which is responsible for impacts on the biodiversity, but would find a different output, a purpose even. So our payoff summarizes this idea. Those who choose Almo Nature is aware that the profits of our sales end up supporting biodiversity.
che
Why did you go for protecting the earth rather than fighting hunger, rare diseases, or something else? Well, you should ask this to Yvonne, actually. But I'll try to say that the environment was Yvonne's focus. He wanted to safeguard the wildlands, those areas where the impact of the humankind is not evident. That was one of his goals. But I also think that at some point you need to choose one cause because resources are limited, so you just need to focus on a single cause. Plus, the climate crisis impacts also many social crises. So if we do something for the climate and the planet, we're probably going to have a positive effect also on social crises. So the two are linked. Giorgio, the question is for you now. Yes, let me get back to the evolution of our company model. What Pier Giovanni did for 5 years eventually led to what I've told you already, and this involves a personal choice, but it's a very much pondered choice, a choice made by a businessman mind, a choice that is not just a philanthropic one, but rather must be considered and seen in light of the threats that the planet is facing today. And the result was that the loss of biodiversity is probably the main threat, the main risk that we see today, as Fabio mentioned, because on biodiversity relies the very existence of the humankind, because as we know, yes, the planet could do well without us. So the result of this analysis, of this reflection, and considering all our experiences working with cats and dogs and different species, we realize the impact of our company on biodiversity and led us to identifying this challenge. And I'm aware that other companies will take care of other causes, but this is why this was emergency that we needed to tackle. The third question is, how does purpose influence the products you sell?
You mean our purpose or the fact that the property has changed? No, I mean the purpose, like choosing the planet as your shareholder, as the beneficiary of your profits. Well, there was no real change in our approach. Throughout his professional life, Yvonne was always consistent, was always the same. We might instead wonder how this change in property had an impact on our products. But even thinking about that, I don't see any changing course because the family is still there. The board of director of the trust still involves the family. So Yvonne's family vision is still driving our business and our activities. Plus, we have this leadership team that is pursuing the goals set by Yvonne, and he set the course for everyone. So I just see continuity. I don't see any change in our course. Giorgio? Well, our purpose means that day after day we keep reflecting upon our company, our attitude, our approach. So that definitely implies even more responsibility. We know that our goal of giving all profits to protect biodiversity also means that our company cannot lie. It cannot. It cannot. Pursue aggressive marketing or advertising simply to sell the product. So today we have to admit that supply chains do have an impact on biodiversity. So we cannot expect a company to be able to radically change the system by itself. So our aspiration also to minimize our impact and our goal of our net zero goal, well, these are still very far ahead in the future. We cannot yet imagine to be able to produce with zero impact on nature, on the planet, and on biodiversity. So in this case too, what we can do is certainly to work and to invest in order to minimize our impact, but what we can really tangibly do on a daily basis is to donate our profits or parts of our profits to reintegrating natural capital. So what we can do as a company is to minimize our impact on the one hand and to stop accumulating, building up wealth on the other, to make sure that all these profits can be reintegrated into human and natural capital. What are the criteria driving your choices in terms of earth protection projects and to protect biodiversity? Well, first and foremost, we sponsor and support non-profit organizations. So those who approach Patagonia and ask for funds, they need to be an association, a non-profit organization. And that's the first thing. And then we have a series of principles. So we need to, first of all, so projects need to be submitted to Patagonia. These projects need to have clear-cut strategies, have specific and measurable goals and objectives. Projects should be action-based, meaning that these actions, these tangible actions, should have the goal of finding and solving the root causes. So addressing root causes and not the symptoms of projects. So we, for example, do not sponsor plastic gathering on beaches. We have nothing against it, of course, that's great, but we try to go to the root causes and not just the symptoms. And then we want projects that promote civic commitment and public involvement and public engagement. So I mentioned that already. So local populations fighting. We try to support those who are struggling and trying to protect their land, their territories. So we support these causes by sustaining, by supporting those who are already struggling in this respect. And I already gave a couple of examples. Well, the criterion behind every choice we make in terms of projects is that of the impact. As I said, our foundation is independent because it's, it receives funds from the company. That means we do not need to look for funds, to look for sponsors. We are independent in that respect. And our only reference, our only basic approach is safeguarding biodiversity. So we choose projects that are efficient and that take tangible actions to restore biodiversity with a considerable impact. That means we perform a very strict assessment. We assess the partners we cooperate with, we make sure there are no other interests involved in addition to safeguarding nature and biodiversity, and we make sure all our actions and interventions are measurable. We take a scientific approach and we make sure there's a clear method to measure our impact and to assess projects and interventions. This is not easy. It's not an easy task. We involved several experts. We were business people. And after making money, we decided to donate this money to diversity. And that's why it was pretty difficult at the beginning for us to choose and manage projects. Today, we do our best to have an active role because we've learned a lot during our first years of work in this field. We know there are no ready-made solutions. There are no one-fits-all solutions. So that's why our foundation always plays an active role. We make assessments, we check everything in the field, and we have a transparent, report of everything we do. Since we defined these criteria, let me now move to a bit of a different question. We go back to what we were saying before. So, can you please tell us about the three main projects you've carried out in the past, or you're currently carrying out?
Can I just tell two of them? There are two European projects, and they are coordinated by the European headquarters. I've already mentioned one of the two in my quick introduction. A few years ago, we supported a campaign called Save the Blue Heart of Europe. This campaign wanted to safeguard rivers in the Balkans because there are some rivers there which are the few that are still free to flow from the spring to the output. And since Patagonia has a clear idea about dams and protecting the land and the environment, we joined this campaign to protect the rivers, and we did this by supporting local communities. In concrete, what we did is in Albania, where the river Vjosa was already subject to projects about building dams. We managed to interact with the Albanian government and the Premier Edi Rama to enter a memorandum that was signed by the Albanian environment minister to make the first river park, the first natural park that is built is established around the river. To do this, we used funds from the Holdfast Collective that I've mentioned earlier. Just to give you an idea, even Leonardo DiCaprio did his part, because when you do projects supporting the environment, even big celebrities want to do their part. I think, to come to the second project, I think that you all eat salmon. The salmon industry is an incredible industry that is centered especially in Norway, which is where they are leader of this industry. The open net salmon farming is quite harmful. The salmons are farmed using a lot of medicines and chemicals, but these farmings are putting at risk the wild salmon population. And in Iceland, local communities are fighting to avoid these farms in their waters. Since our flywheel fishermen are very much passionate about this, Yvonne Choniard, we went to Iceland, where Björk, the famous singer, made a song and made it available to support this cause. So these two projects are centered. One is about protecting the wilderness of lands, while the other is about protecting the biodiversity, in this case of wild salmons. Okay, I'll try to briefly touch upon three projects that come from three different scopes of our action. The first one is about natural habitats. Fondazione Capellino is close to Edward Osmond Wilson, who is a thinker who theorized the idea that it's important to leave at least 50% of the Earth's space to biodiversity. And he argued with biological arguments. Well, our vision is that we need to increase the protected areas, and the solution to do so is to connect them by creating ecological and biodiversity corridors that can connect different protected areas of the planet. Our Fondazione committed to create these biodiversity corridors in several areas of the world, and we started in Europe, where we've started mapping the whole European network of corridors, and we want to propose a project of a big network of ecological corridors. We already started working in Germany and Italy too. But we're also taking action in other parts of the world. We've just started this year a big project in the USA, which is called Y2Y, W2W, Y2Y, which aims to create a huge biodiversity corridor going from the Yellowstone Park to the northern Canadian territories. We also committed against climate change, and we've started a project in Florence, which is about nature in the city, and by which it's possible to have nature in cities, and that this is useful for us humans. And the goal is to study the impact and in order to manage better our urban parks. Florence became our science lab. We're working with the National Research Center. And this is not only about planting new trees or trying to study the impact of carbon dioxide. We are doing projects with monitoring that we do before starting, and then we will keep monitoring every 10 years to see how our cities are changing and how this solution can be useful for our contemporary cities, without forgetting that we as humans must set ourselves limits and to give spaces for biodiversity. Let me finish with the last area where we are working, which is farming. Farming is somehow in the middle between production, human production, and nature. This topic is quite center and dramatic, considering the impact that farming has on ecosystems, and I'm referring now to intensive farming. We are carrying out a project in San Salvatore Monferrato in the north of Italy, where we are doing what we call biodiverse agriculture on an estate which is 22 hectares wide. We are experimenting how it's possible to have a farming that can protect biodiversity in a production context. This is quite a challenge. We are collecting the data, and we are finding out what results can we bring in this area. Thank you, Giorgio, for respecting the time set. What's the relationship between your company and its shareholder foundation or trust, and how the shareholder can impact the choices of the company? Well, very briefly, in the last slide earlier, there were two organizations, Patagonia Foundation and the Holdfast Collective. These two organizations divided between themselves the property of the ownership of Patagonia. The trust owns only 2% of the company value, but 100% of the voting rights, while the Holdfast Collective, which is a non-profit organization, owns 98% of the company but has no voting rights. This balance that was created allowed to keep this very balance. The board of directors of the Purpose Trust is the subject responsible and the subject that controls the purpose of the company ownership, and also decides how the funds are used. In this board of directors, there are Yvonne Chouinard, his wife, and his two children. They are no longer shareholders, so they no longer enjoy the fruits of the company's activities, but they are there to ensure that the purpose is respected. In legal terms, we set a structure so that the company purpose is clear and cannot be changed in any way. And we did this at the 50th birthday, at the 50th anniversary of the company, setting that nothing can change for another 50 years. But I wanted to stress the fact that the board of directors still has some influence on the decision process.
In this case, there's a small difference in terms of corporate model for us, I mean, because at Fondazione Cappellino, we actually we chose to apply the Italian laws, because these laws, and in Europe things are the same, it is the foundation itself to control and guide the company. So our objective was to implement a model that we call reintegration economy, whereby it is the foundation that controls the company. So the company is based on labor and work, but the foundation and those working for the group, they, they earn money by being employed in Almo Nature. So the workers, in a way, they earn profits for the company, and then they are committed to reinvesting these profits. So we have a non-profit organization that actually controls and guides the company, also in terms of choosing the projects. Do you think your model can be replicated? Well, that would be great. Well, everything is replicable, but I doubt it, to be honest. I doubt it because I think our model is very radical and it completely changes capitalistic approaches. But I mentioned 1% for the planet. Craig, Matthew, and Yvonne, two friends, simply decided together to establish a foundation whereby 1% of the profits would be donated to the planet. So from two friends, we got up to 5,000 companies. So you start small and you get big. The B Corp movement is a movement that I think could really radically change capitalistic models and moving it from shareholder capitalism that is based on the maximization of profits for shareholders to stakeholder capitalism, that is a capitalism which benefits more players. So the B Corp movement today involves about 9,000 companies. And again, you start small, but then you involve more and more players. Can this model go that far? Well, we'll see. We'll see. Well, this is definitely more radical than the 1% of the planet and the B Corp movement, but it would be great if other businesses and other companies followed in the wake. Well, yes, absolutely, absolutely. We're starting from a radical step, so we shouldn't see this radicalism as a hurdle. What these models can lead to, instead, is a sort of a virtuous circle, which means that other businesses and companies can gain awareness and, in a way, imitate, follow our model. I personally think that developing large, far-reaching and shared projects for the safeguard of biodiversity means that these projects can also be submitted to other companies, other entrepreneurs and businessmen, so that even if they do not take the same radical steps, they can at least, for example, put a limit to dividends or to profits and decide that at least for some time these profits can be donated or reinvested into the environment, to nature. Again, not as philanthropy, but as awareness, understanding that having an impact on biodiversity also means having an impact on business. So sponsoring biodiversity projects can also benefit business itself. So it's something we look forward to. We're getting to the final question before giving the floor to the public. So all those who are following the streaming event, don't be shy. Get ready with your questions. Do ask questions. I'm calling upon you. So, final question for our speakers. We could have asked the public, but we want to ask you. Do you believe that consumers are rewarding your corporate model? Do you think that when they need to choose, they actually choose you because of this model you're implementing or not? Well, consumers' choices are very complex choices and they depend on a zillion factors. For sure, these choices are related to what a company is. What in this case, I'm talking about Patagonia, what we are. So our model was shared, was communicated, so part of our customers buy our products knowing who we are and knowing what we've decided to do. So they choose us because our values, because of our principles. I also personally think that even just in Europe, I mean, there are different levels of awareness, meaning Northern Europe is more aware, more focused on some topics. Southern Europe, at least Italy, is taking a little bit longer to do that. But I don't think our approach leads or has an impact of 100% of our sales, because even if we don't want to, there are some, fashion trends, and I know that fashion and what is cool can lead consumers as well. But in our campaigns, we always say consumers should buy what they really need. They should do their best to repair the garments. We often mention the word unfashionable, meaning that our products should not be related to fashion. So all our values have are oriented, and so this partially maybe has an impact on consumers, but not entirely. Well, that's a question we often ask ourselves. Today, we cannot say that our sales are so much driven by our approach to biodiversity or by our choices. I'm not sure this really has a big impact on consumers, but certainly this has an impact. I mean, consumers are important for the success of our model as well, meaning we need consensus. We need consensus from the public. It's not just, some congratulations or encouragement, but consumers need to be aware that when they choose a product, when they choose our product on the shelf, or they choose a different product by a multinational company or competitors, well, they need to know they are making a difference. So consumers themselves need to evolve, and they need to be aware that on the one hand, there's a product where all profits are reinvested into biodiversity. On the other hand, we have other products that are still generating an impact on nature, on the environment. And we're doing our best to make sure this message is clear and to make sure our brand is more and more recognized.
Bene, allora
Well, and the first part ends now. Before giving the this was the second part actually. Before giving the word, giving the floor to the audience, I wanted to ask you all, how interesting did you find everything that was told so far? And I would like to understand if we answered at least some of your questions. I don't know if I can get some general feedback. Yes, no. That's great. I would start now by taking the questions from the people present here, and then We'll move to the online audience. Hi, everybody. Congratulations, you're two great companies, but your impact on biodiversity is huge. The apparel industry and the pet food industry are terrible in this regard. So my question is, what are you doing to reduce the impact of your company? Thank you. Well, thanks for the question. There is no doubt that the apparel sector is one of the most impactful on this very planet, and nobody denies this. And this is why our founder, when he realized what it took to make clothes, he started to some actions to minimize this impact. So my introduction was very quick. Usually I talk at greater length. Let's say that the first tagline of the company was that we want to make the best product possible, impacting with the less possible impact on the environment. Minimizing the impact on the environment is a journey that started in the 90s and has not ended yet. When I said that Patagonia tries to clean up the whole supply chain, this is the truth. This is what we do. And we do this by working on the fibers and also on the energy used in the facilities to manufacture products. So in the factories that we don't own, we are pointing to a reduction up to 90% by 2050 of CO2 emissions. In other factories, we are using 100% of preferred materials, which means that we replace traditional fibers with fibers that are better for the humankind, animals, and the planet. So basically, we're talking about recycled materials. I recycle polyester, nylons, feather down, cotton, wool. And when we cannot recycle fibers, this is about fibers that cannot be recycled, but we can then turn to regenerative recycled cotton. There would be so much to say about regenerative farming, by the way. Or we use wool that is produced following very strict protocols in terms of the way sheep are kept and their fleece is taken. But yes, the impact is dramatic, not in terms of production. There are some statistics by which a piece of garment used 7 times and then is just binned, is just trashed. Speaking of this, Patagonia is doing everything. At Patagonia, we're doing everything we can to minimize our impact. And we're working on the second-hand end sector and reparations. We're doing everything we can. We don't call ourselves sustainable. We call ourselves responsible. Yes, this topic is essential in the pet food industry. You should consider that we work with meat, with carnivores animals. So their feeding involves the slaughtering industry. As Fabio said, the role of companies is that of keeping investing to minimize this impact. Almo Nature which is very much imitated, I must say, is experimenting with proteins, such as with grown meat. But the truth is that we're still quite far from zeroing the impact of our production activities on biodiversity. And this is about our sector, but any industry, any human activity, I think the job of you all strongly impacts on natural capital. And the lack of sustainability of this balance is more and more evident today. So let me say once again, what we could do was at least to set a limit to the accumulation of financial wealth coming from profits, which are the result of these economic activities, while trying to keep a growth model, a production model that invests to minimize its impact, and finally allocate its profits not to generate more income, but to try and give a future to that very production activities. Now a question from our audience who's attending in streaming. Yes, there are a few questions. Let's start with this one. You said much, but did your companies get any fiscal benefits? Otherwise, what's the point? Yes, this is very typical of our brain, of our mindset. You always need a benefit to do something. I hope that I could convey something in the short time I had, and if anything, I hope I conveyed the lack of interest of our founder, in the case of our company, with regard to his choice. Now there is no incentive to do what Patagonia does. And I want to tell you something more. The first Trump administration, to stay true to their promises that they made with their entrepreneur electorate, they reduced taxes, and the administration invested those taxes in environmental causes. They could have kept that revenue, but they didn't. So this idea that we always need to have a benefit I think we could do well without it, and sometimes we could do something just for an ideal.
Io gioco in casa perché sono...
Well, I'm in charge of taxation, so it's easier for me. Yes, this idea of individual selfish advantages and interests does not so easily go hand in hand with these radical changes which have in mind universal benefits. In 2018, we shifted from 9 months that we spent to explain to the Italian Revenue Agency what we had in mind, and we came out of those 9 months with great advantages because the Italian Revenue Agency managed to understand what we wanted to do, and we came out with even more taxes than we would have paid just based on production, because we had to pay an extra tax on donations and so on. But what was the outcome for us? We were able to set up a foundation which is a holding, which means it's a non-profit business, meaning it's a business, but it's a non-profit one. But Fondazione Cappellino is paying all national and local taxes. On the other hand, it's considered it's considered as a foundation committed to biodiversity. Let's hear another question from our online audience. Wouldn't have it been easier to reduce prices and let the consumers use those savings to do something, well, to do something good? Well, it's very hard for me to answer such a question. Let me just add something. I don't know exactly what the price structure is like because I'm not in charge of that within the company. But as far as I know, our cost structure is a standard one. Our margins are standard. But in order to get the fibers we want, in order um, to have our fair trade program in place, in order to invest into plants and factories, to convert the energy use, from coal to renewable energy sources and so on, well, we invest so much that our product prices is also related to that. I cannot say more because I don't know those details so well, but I think this question is meant to be a bit provocative. Well, maybe that's an envious, a jealous competitor that asked that question. Well, that question makes me smile. Of course, we could have done that. We could have given all these savings, so to say, all the foundation's resources, step by step to the consumers. So we could have simply sold everything and give all the profits to poor people. Of course, we could have done that. But we tried to do something else, that is to develop a specific economic model, a model capable of surviving in today's economic scenario. So our idea is instead to protect the company, to protect what it's doing, to protect the employment and the people that work there, and to keep paying taxes for the community, but to use the profits to reintegrate natural capital, and so make sure this model grows into the future and is not left in the hands of the individual. Well, that helps me add something. You're absolutely right. I got a bit lost because that question took me aback, honestly. But today we should have three objectives: environmental, social, and economic sustainability. And even economic sustainability is worth pursuing because that's the only way to also create a virtuous model. So I fully agree with what Giorgio just said. We still have time for one more question from the audience in person and one from the people online, if there are still a few questions, and then we can go towards the end to conclude our meeting.
I was curious about the following, because I'm in your position. I also made a very radical choice, in my view. So I wanted to ask you, what was the landmark moment of your life when you understood that what you were doing, what you had been doing until then, wasn't right, and you took an internal decision to change? I think this could be a quite inspirational example for those who try to follow your example. Thank you. You should ask this to the entrepreneur, so probably it's easier for Almo to take this. I just try to answer by what I know about Yvonne Chouinard. I think that there were many turning points. I've been working 26 years for this company, which is half of its own life, and I've heard many stories about moments that triggered in Yvonne a new choice. To give you an example, when I was telling about the passage from traditional to organic cotton, that change wasn't easy. For 2 years, the company didn't use traditional cotton because they were supporting the conversion of the cotton supply chain. And this happened because Yvonne went visiting the cotton fields, understanding that there was nothing natural in the cotton farming. There was a desertified landscape where farmers were using gas masks. Or I remember when some Patagonia employees in one of his stores always had a headache because they were dealing with formaldehyde. I think all these moments, especially for a visionary such as Yvon Chouinard, trigger choices, and they are one after the other, which lead to the eventual one, in the case of Yvonne, considering that he was 85 when he made this choice, of worrying about the future. He could have just sold the company or gifted all the company resources. A few years ago, the company was worth $3 billion. He could have done anything, but he said, I want to go on with this experiment. I want to show that this can be an example for other companies too. So I am no entrepreneur. I am trying to interpret his example, and I hope this could be an answer. And probably Pier Giovanni could answer this question better. I've entered this company when I was quite young, and the story I've been telling you was the story of a journey that I did together with Pier Giovanni. And I remember this idea of being in the service of a purpose. And if we consider the idea of work, a work which is not only meant to create wealth, profits for a few, but as an activity carried on every day with labor that is that has as a purpose the social, the common good, that look after the next generation, such as that of my children. Well, this idea was a pushing factor that helps me not just to go to work, but to feel myself as an activist and part of an activist company that is trying to change the world.
Ancora una domanda dallo streaming.
Let's now take another question from the streaming. This comes from abroad. I think this is for Almo, and Kevin congratulates on our video. And he says, how will you measure the real impact of these biodiversity corridors? This is a very good question and an extremely important one. Let's start by saying that biodiversity is about balance. A sum of components that must find a balance among them. And this is the magical balance of life. There is no recipe. So if we think about leaving huge areas, in this case biodiversity corridors, to leave them to nature, we must be aware that we are experimenting here. And we must be aware that we will need to manage a cohabitation. that cannot be constrained by fencing, but will need to revolve on the ability, on the concept that humans are just one species on this planet, and that the concept that we need to protect biodiversity, which also includes us humans. To do this, we need to experiment, and we've been learning a lot in the different projects we carry on throughout the world. And we think that the point is not just to safeguard nature, but we need to work on the landscape. The social component, meaning people, need to accept that spaces must be devoted to biodiversity, and they also need to have space for their activities. This is clearly a challenge, and we are sure that reducing to zero biodiversity is not a scenery that we can afford.
I'd just like to add something. When you mentioned these corridors, you reminded me that freedom to roam meant freedom to migrate. That was Patagonia's campaign a few years ago. So I think this idea of preserving biodiversity is really felt and shared by anyone who has nature at heart. So I hope your project is successful. Now, I can't remember how our project was implemented, but I remember this idea of freedom to roam, meaning the coexistence of human beings and other species, which is something we struggle to accept. Suffices to think what happens every day around us. Well, we've come to the end of our meetings. Even beautiful things come to an end, unfortunately. I want to thank our speakers. I want to thank the public for their questions. One more question would have been even more useful. Maybe even more provocative questions would have been good. But let me ask here, let me call here. Hello, my name is Elvira Bonfanti from Palazzo Ducale, who's been hosting you today. I want to thank Per Giovanni because he was really the heart and soul of this event. But I also want to thank Mr. Zerbini and Mr. Lafetto for their contributions. I would like to conclude by thanking the public, of course, both the public in person and those online. We have recorded great figures, and I'm not just saying this because it makes us proud, but also because I want to remind you all that this is the final event in a series of meetings. We started on the 9th of May with the Festival of Sustainable Development, a Genoa event. Then on the 18th of May, we had Saito Kohei, the Japanese communist philosopher who told us about capital in the Anthropocene. And I'm summarizing previous events and previous episodes, so to say, just to highlight something that I think is really important. It is we at our Fondazione Cultura, we have a mission that is promoting culture, public culture, but the highest purpose is to build citizenship in the broadest meaning, in the broadest sense of this word. That is citizenship not just at a local level, but also at a national and international level. That is creating close-knit networks and have people talk to each other. So these events were a great opportunity in this respect. And I think there was a very important fil rouge running through all these events. Of course, there was a whole series of keywords that have been mentioned time and again that are all, and that are keywords of this, that is biodiversity, the planet, and many more common elements, taking our elephant from city to city. But I think there's one common concept, one common word, and one common concept, that is that of shared assets, collective assets, and care for these collective assets. I think this is essential, this is vital, to think about it, to talk about it, and to network, and to really create networks and to work together having the same purpose in mind. Thank you so much.